Despite the cold wind, Nina Ivanovna stood in an old coat over a thin blouse. On her head she wore a cashmere beret, which did not hide her grey hair at all. The sad image of Nina Ivanovna was completed by her old shoes with broken heels, which had not seen their nails for a long time. Every now and then, looking at the faces of passers-by, the old woman looked for her son. Unfortunately, her favorite Borenka was still nowhere to be seen. And I boiled his favorite dumplings. Until he comes they will definitely cool down, thought the old woman, shivering. She was brought out of her sad thoughts by a pleasant female voice. "Hello, Nina Ivanovna." The old woman turned round sharply and saw an elderly woman in front of her, who by the most modest standards was 10 years younger than she was. Recognizing the face of the woman who had called her, Nina Ivanovna exclaimed joyfully, "Anechka, is it really you? I've come to meet my Borenka from work." The woman smiled understandingly and then said, "Clearly, Ninochka, this business of course is good, but I propose to return to the flat. The sky, as the clouds are covered with clouds. It's just about to start snowing. And Borya will come back. Tea with us will drink. In this weather, it's just right." Then, without waiting for the old woman's reply, Anna Sergeyevna tactfully took her under the elbow and led her away. Knowing that there was no light in the entrance, the woman thoughtfully lit a pocket torch, which she always took with her on a walk. Lighting her way, Anna helped the old woman up to the first floor and carefully opened the front door. "What is it that you smell so appetizing, Nin? I've got an appetite." "I told you. I cooked dumplings for my Borenka," smiled the old woman. "When do you have time for everything, Ninochka? I've been meaning to make something like this for so many times, but I have no time," Anna Sergeyevna exclaimed delightedly. Meanwhile, the landlady hung up her coat on the rack, took off her beret and then her shoes. Then the old lady cordially invited the guest to go to the kitchen and taste her dumplings. "Well, what will you feed Borka with then? I tried for him, I know." Anna hastened to refuse. "Don't worry. I've made a lot. There's enough for everyone, as much as I need. You know, old age is no fun," Nina Ivanovna objected. Anna's face showed that she was very keen to try the dumplings, but her natural modesty prevented her from accepting the old woman's invitation. Then, overcoming her innate shyness, she said, "All right, what's the matter? I'll try your delicacies. And in return, I've bought buns with stuffing, and enough for you and Borka your leave." Pulling out a bag from the bag, replied the neighbor. "So you yourself have grandchildren, Anya?" the old woman said cautiously. "Come on, I'll survive. The grandchildren will not come before the weekend anyway. I'd better buy them fresh ones then," Anna replied. Then, the women went to the kitchen, where they started their simple dinner. Praising the culinary talents of the hostess, Anna Sergeyevna informed her that her son Boris had been left on the night shift. For Nina Ivanovna this meant only one thing. He would not be back until morning, so she could go to bed with a clear conscience. After chatting with her neighbor about this and that, Anna put her to bed and switched off the light. Then she got dressed, slammed the door, and went up to the 3rd floor. In her heart, Anna felt sorry for the old woman, who had been worn down by life. When Anna moved here with her husband, Nina Ivanovna had already lived here for several years. She lived with her husband Viktor and her son Boris, whom she never called Boryenka. Everyone in the neighborhood had long known that Nina Ivanovna's husband was a carpenter from God. But like many craftsmen with golden hands, he often abused alcohol and, going into all sorts of mischief, could raise his hand on his wife or son. Often Nina Ivanovna had to hide Borenka at the neighbors, and herself ran away to the next door to a friend. Only after Viktor, tired of heavy drinking, fell asleep at the table, she took her son and returned home. When Borenka was 16, his father died of a heart attack. It was hard to say for sure whether alcohol had taken his life or whether it was some hereditary predisposition. Anyway, with Viktor's passing, the neighbors thought that now they would breathe a sigh of relief. But at that moment, Borka, going through a difficult age of transition, as if off the chain, he started smoking, drinking, and fighting. With the sin of half, entered vocational school, but could not study normally, and after a while, stepped on a slippery slope and went to prison for a penny theft. Of course, if it hadn't been for Nina Ivanovna, it would have been very difficult for her son in prison. And so, she stretched herself from the last forces, sending voluminous transfers and hoping that Borenka will come to his senses and take up his mind. Unfortunately, Nina Ivanovna's son never settled down. Instead of finding a nice girl and getting married, he went on bouts of drunkenness, from which he each time was more and more difficult to get out. Because of Boris's addictions, women could not be near him and ran away after the first binge. Unfortunately, Nina Ivanovna's son was never to celebrate his 40th birthday. Boris died just a week before his birthday. Nina Ivanovna turned 65 that year. After the death of her son, she immediately became older and stooped. Many of Nina Ivanovna's acquaintances could not help noticing that she looked at least 10 years older than her real age. The old woman's life immediately lost all meaning and value. Her non-existent daughter-in-law would never come to visit, and there was nowhere to expect grandchildren. For a couple of years, she practically did not go out, and if she left the flat, it was only to buy something to eat. Some of the old residents stopped recognizing Nina Ivanovna at all. She had changed and aged so much. And in the last year, they began to notice strange things about the old woman. Still hoping to meet her late son from work, she would come to the entrance of the factory where he worked shortly before his death. Despite the bad weather outside the window or health problems, the old woman waited with trepidation for his return. Knowledgeable people from the factory, trying not to traumatize the old lady's psyche, told her that Borka stayed to work the night shift. It seemed that Nina Ivanovna was quite satisfied with such an answer, and even gave her tormented heart a ghostly hope. Anna Sergeyevna, her upstairs neighbor, looked after the old woman as best she could. She cooked meals, cleaned the flat, and did the laundry. Almost the only entertainment for the lonely elderly woman was looking at old photographs. Most often, after such views, she went to the factory's gatehouse and, looking at the faces of employees, was looking forward to her son Borenka. One day, just in time for her son's birthday, the old woman decided to make him a holiday. To bake Boria's favorite chicken pie and cook some cutlets in addition. The son liked the cutlets to be as big as his male palm, covered with calluses and abrasions. Besides meat and flour, Nina Ivanovna bought apples and chocolates. Let my son enjoy himself. Shouldn't I wait for him at the entrance? According to my calculations, he is just about to finish his shift. Sat down on the bench, thought the old woman. Looking at the faces of men passing by, Nina Ivanovna, according to a method only she could understand, sifted out candidates who did not look like Borenka. Suddenly, 3 meters away from her, a painfully familiar profile appeared. Borenka, my son. Is it you? Squinting blindly, exclaimed the old woman. The stranger stopped and, as if wishing to get rid of the annoying old woman as soon as possible, muttered, Well, yes. I've waited for you, darling. And I went to the shop for meat and flour. I want to make cutlets and bake a pie for the table. It's good that we didn't miss each other. Are you tired, son? The old woman asked me sympathetically. Yes, I am. So why are we standing out here in the cold? Take my bag with groceries and let's go home quickly. Nina Ivanovna ordered in a hostess manner. Yes, of course. The man indifferently stretched out and taking the old woman's bag from the bench, obediently followed her. On the way to Nina Ivanovna's house, the stranger looked warily at his crazy traveling companion, who to all appearances mistook him for her dead son. And the old woman kept chirping and chirping, unable to restrain the excitement of meeting her son. Meanwhile, the stranger followed Nina Ivanovna up to the first floor and hesitated at the door. Why are you standing there like a stranger? Come in, undress, and I'll give you tea and a bun, and then the cutlets will be ready, said the old woman in a tone that did not tolerate objections. Not wanting to argue with the landlady, the man sighed sadly and went inside. With a trained eye, He looked round the hallway. He looked at the coat rack and found no other clothes on it. There were old women's shoes on the floor and no hint of a man's presence. I shook my head. But the man was prevented from sinking into sad thoughts by the cheerful voice of Nina Ivanovna, who called him to the kitchen. Sipping hot tea, the stranger looked at the old woman, in his heart hoping that she would continue to consider him her son. Why am I clucking like a hen? I've got you talking, son. You're off shift. You're tired. Let's go to bed. The morning is wiser in the evening, exclaimed the old woman. Thank you, mummy, whispered the stranger, whose eyes immediately brimmed with tears. Laying down in someone else's bed, the man caught himself thinking that it had not been so pleasant to his soul for a long time. And the next day, the old woman congratulated him on his birthday and fed him with cutlets and flavored pie stuffed with chicken fillet. The week flew by. One day, hurrying home from the shop, Anna Sergeyevna decided to visit her downstairs neighbor. She hadn't seen her for a long time. As if she hadn't fallen ill, poor thing. She went up to the first floor, put her heavy bag on the floor, and pressed the doorbell. At the same time there was a distinctive trill and a slightly audible shuffling of feet. Anna Sergeyevna immediately felt better. But when Nina Ivanovna opened the door, the neighbor's surprise knew no bounds. The old woman was wearing a clean dress, which had been in the wardrobe for more than 10 years since she had bought it. But the main joy reflected the face of Nina Ivanovna, which literally glowed with happiness. Hello, Anechka. Come in, come in. Don't stand on the threshold. How are you, Nina Ivanovna? Cautiously asked the guest. In response, the old woman laughed cheerfully and said, I'm all right, Anechka. Here with Borenka we're putting things in order. My son took care of the plumbing in the bathroom, because I have all the taps running. At that moment the guest felt a slight dizziness and rapidly increasing chills. With whom? With whom, you say? With my son, Borenka. Don't you remember him? He has an unscheduled holiday. He's entitled to it as an advanced worker, so he's helping his mother. Come on in, I'll boil the kettle. Let's sit down and have tea, said the old woman. Anna Sergeyevna slowly wiped the sweat from her forehead, and then, unbuttoning her coat, pulled off her boots. As she did so, the woman caught herself thinking that the old woman's illness was progressing very quickly. But when she gingerly looked into the bathroom, she was surprised to find that she was almost senseless, and could hardly restrain a frightened cry. The fact was that there was indeed a man in the bathroom, wearing a threadbare t-shirt and tights stretched to the knees. The stranger took off the tap and was expertly replacing the leaky seal. Good afternoon, Anna Sergeyevna said, hesitating at every word. Good afternoon, the man replied quietly, and lowered his eyes in embarrassment. How could I not have guessed at once? It must be a black realtor. He found out that a crazy old woman lives here, and now he's harassing her. He's waiting for the moment to snatch the flat. The guest thought anxiously. Meanwhile, the old woman called everyone to the kitchen to drink tea. The man looked at Anna and bent under her gaze. He must be afraid. I guess he didn't expect such a turn, thought Anna Sergeyevna. Then, having gathered her courage, she decided to try an adventure. Nina Ivanovna, and let Borenka with me. Let him look at my taps too, because my Seryoshka has no time. He's on fire at work. Sure, why not help good people? Really, son? Readily exclaimed. Yes, mum, answered the man, and readily shook his head. Then, with the look of a criminal sentenced to execution, followed Anna. Of course, Nina Ivanovna's neighbor was not going to let this false bore her into her flat, and therefore interrogated him right on the stairwell. Well, tell me the whole truth, my dear. Who are you there? A swindler? A black realtor? The man stood silent for a while, then raised his sad grey eyes and said, To you from the beginning, I guess. Yes, be so kind from the very beginning, Anna Sergeyevna said icily. I was born in Bashkiria. My father and mother were deprived of parental rights for alcoholism and idleness. I grew up in an orphanage, and when the time came I was returned from the orphanage to my place of registration. But my parents had already drunk. The house was dying. I wanted to cure my parents of drunkenness, but all to no avail. I spent a month with them and left wherever I could. I worked as a loader or at a construction site, and then my friends lured me here. The city is big, there's plenty of work. I worked like an ox. I saved up money for a flat, but they cheated me. I wanted to buy a bigger and cheaper place, but in the end, they cheated me, drugged me with vodka. I was left without housing, money, and documents. Of course, I tried to get justice, but there's no way. They have everything bought and grabbed, and who am I? Just a laborer from Bashkiria. So I found myself on the street. I slept in basements, on benches in the open air. I got by on occasional wages. I collected scrap metal at scrap yards, and a week ago I found a skein of strong rope at the dump and decided to get rid of these torments. I wanted to hang myself, so I was looking for a place to hang myself, so that it would be quiet and inconspicuous. And then this old woman. She treated me like her own son, you know? I've never been treated like that before. So I started calling her Mum, said the man, smearing tears on his thin, haggard face. I know I'm doing a bad thing, but I can't help it. As a mother, she became me. So I pretend to be her Borenka, so want to be a little bit of a favorite son. Sobbing, added the man. From the frankness of the stranger, Anna Sergeyevna became uncomfortable. It was obvious from the man's eyes that he was not lying, and could hardly have thought up such a heartbreaking story on the fly. Meanwhile, Nina Ivanovna's guest continued. I have only one favor to ask of you. Don't refuse for God's sake, and come to your senses. Don't turn me in to the police. I'm not a thief or a swindler. I promise to leave on my own. Please, please, by God, just don't call the police. Mum wants me to take her to see a cardiologist on Monday. I'll take her, and then I'll leave. She's having a hard time on her own, you know? And the road is slippery. What if she falls again? Well, stay here for a while if that's the case. Just watch out for me. If anything happens, I'll go straight to the district police. Anna Sergeyevna changed her anger into mercy. No, I'm not like that. The man swore. Then, having gathered his courage, he timidly asked, Can I borrow a couple of 100 rubles from you? No, not for vodka, but don't think so. To buy a change of underwear. A cheap one. I'm not used to others. I'm ashamed to ask my mum. She thinks I work in a factory. After his words, tears came to Anna Sergeyevna's eyes. I'll borrow, of course. What's the matter? Thank you very much. I will definitely pay you back, the man assured Anna. All right, I believe. Go on, because Nina Ivanovna is probably waiting for you. But remember, I'll keep an eye on you. If anything happens, I'll hand you over to the district police. Anna Sergeyevna said goodbye. Meanwhile, the man went down to the first floor and, opening the door, quietly entered. There was a ringing silence in the flat. The man cautiously looked into the old woman's room. Nina Ivanovna was sleeping there, curled up in a ball, on a sold-out shell bed. The man carefully covered the old woman with a blanket and silently left the room. He had no one closer than this old woman, who had been offended by life. No one had ever loved him so much or waited for his return. This new, hitherto unexplored feeling captured the man's heart completely, giving him hope for a bright future. At the same time, he was unbearably hurt by the fact that he had to deceive her. But the man could not help it, and was happy to live in the illusion he had invented. That's what a real mum should be like. One who loves you and waits for you to come back no matter what, the man whispered with tears in his eyes. Winter passed, and the man lived with Nina Ivanovna. He went with her to the polyclinic and made an appointment with a cardiologist. He went to the shop for groceries and ran to the pharmacy for medicines, washed the floors in the flat, and even washed the laundry by hand, because the old lady had never had a washing machine. He repaid his debt to Anna Sergeyevna and generally behaved like a law-abiding citizen. Nina Ivanovna never asked him why he didn't go to work. The holiday was long over, after all, Every day the old woman cooked him breakfast and constantly complained that he was not married and did not think about children. After the spring holidays, he met Anna Sergeyevna by chance near the entrance. "Boris, you said that you know about plumbing and construction," the neighbor asked instead of greeting him. "Yes, I do." "Why do you ask?" "In general, I will not beat around the bush. In our housing and utilities company needs a plumber. Well, the tap, there to change. Once a year to inspect the roof for leaks. Well, and all that sort of thing. Salary, of course, small, but still better than nothing." "So how will you go?" Anna Sergeyevna asked, looking carefully into the eyes of her interlocutor. After her words, the man was as if replaced. He was ready to jump up to the sky with happiness. "Of course I'll go. Only, will they take me? I don't have any documents." The man blushed and confessed. "Well, don't worry about it. If there was a desire, and I'll talk to the district police officer about it, we'll help you with the documents." Anna Sergeyevna smiled and answered. At this moment, in a rush of feelings, Boris was ready to kiss the hands of his savior, but she only waved away. "Come on. Your life has only just begun. You're young, you'll have it all. And for Nina Ivanovna, thank you very much. Honestly, my soul is happy when I look at her." After that memorable conversation, Nina Ivanovna's son, as agreed, started working as a fitter in the housing and utilities department. The residents of the neighborhood houses loved him very much for his easygoing disposition, diligence, and honesty. The man's secret was that he never took money from the tenants in excess of what was due and, clutching a repair suitcase in his hands, rushed to their aid at their first call. One day, Nina Ivanovna asked him at breakfast, "Son, are you working today? Maybe we'll go to my father's cemetery? We'll tear up the grass, fix the fence." "Of course we'll go, Mum. I'll just make an appointment at the office." In the afternoon they were already standing near the old unpainted fence. Guessing what he would have to face, Boris had brought a suitcase with tools. Then he brushed the bars, removed the grass from the mound, and sponged the tombstone. "Your father was a good man, Borenka. It's a pity he drank. If it wasn't for that damned vodka, we'd live now as if we were at Christ's side. He had golden hands," the old woman sadly remarked. "Yes, Mum. Everything is so," said the man, not knowing what to answer. "You are my only pride. I know that vodka is unacceptable for you. You always refuse even from Magariches in the housing and utilities department. Well, let's go to my son's grave then. It's not far," Nina Ivanovna suggested, blotting her eyes with a handkerchief. The man stood still for a moment, and then, with his head down, followed the old woman. The path meandered from right to left, as if it wanted to confuse the guests of the cemetery. Finally, having passed a slender row of tombstones and fences, they came to the right place. Nina Ivanovna leaned on the fence and looked for a long time at the photograph on the tombstone, whitened by time and winds. Then, having collected her thoughts, she turned to the man standing behind her and asked, "What's your name, sweetheart? I mean your real name." "Peter," the man replied in a shaky voice. "Peter. Petya. What a nice name. Forgive me for being a sinful fool, but I'll call you Borenka. Don't look at me like that. I'm not out of my mind. I understand everything. I know you're not my son. I have the death certificate and photos. But you're in my heart. You're my Borenka. That's how it is, Borenka. Don't leave me, my dear." "I don't want to die alone," said Nina Ivanovna, sobbing. "I won't, Mum. Don't even doubt it. I have nowhere to go, and there is no one closer to you," Pyotr replied with tears in his eyes. The man put Boris's grave in order, and took his mother to the bus stop. For the first time in the last few months, Pyotr felt an unprecedented calmness and coziness. Now, he no longer considered himself a deceiver. The next morning, Nina Ivanovna waited until her son left for work, and went up to the third floor to her neighbor. "Good afternoon, Annechka. I came to you for help, dear." From the threshold began the old woman. Anna Sergeyevna raised an eyebrow in surprise. I know everything about my son. And it's not about that at all. I want to leave him my flat. Help me make a will, said the old woman with difficulty restraining excitement. Nina Ivanovna, and you have weighed everything well. You won't change your mind. No, my dear, I won't change my mind. I have no one closer than Borenka. If I die, where will he go? Will he wander in the street? I'll make a will, you help me, correct it if there's anything. And when I die, you'll give it to Boris yourself, Nina Ivanovna said with a sense of accomplished duty. All right, don't worry, Ninochka. I'll do everything, Anna answered with difficulty, holding back her tears. After seeing the old woman off, she sat down in the kitchen and wept openly. A few years after that memorable conversation, in the 78th year of her life, Nina Ivanovna passed away. She left quietly and without fuss, as worthy people should leave.